Well, hey everybody, Tom Miller here, and I have our November expert. And let me tell you, you are going to be wowed by our November expert. And this is November, the month of gratitude. It's the month of the best holiday of the year, which is Thanksgiving, in my opinion. And what a topic, right? What other better topic than be talking about how to develop an inclusive climate with my colleague, and I'm really lucky enough to say friend, Dr. Linda Jordon. And Dr. Linda Jordon, she's a leadership coach and a diversity and inclusion trainer and consultant. She's got over 30 years of experience in management, leadership development training. She's a member of the John Maxwell team. And I mean, her just, experiences coaching, business process improvement, diversity and inclusion. She's worked contact center development and management. I mean, not just in the United States, but across the globe. And I think what I love most about Linda is that Linda is a lifelong learner. And so she just became Dr. Linda Jordon. But not only that, she started her own business, and she's really working outside of her former comfort zone, right? She's taken that step outside. And I just love that about her. She's willing to try and learn everything. And that's why I was like, no other person's better to talk to a group of principals than someone who's a lifelong learner like Linda. So Linda, thanks so much for being our expert in the month of November, talking to our members of our Empowered Executives Inner Circle. So the floor is yours, Dr. Jordon.
Well, thank you, Tom. It's my pleasure to be here today to share with all of you the importance of being and having an inclusive climate in the workplace. And so that's what I'm going to spend the time on today, is sharing with you a little bit more about the importance of it and some things that you can do to make sure that your environment is inclusive. So just to give you a little bit more about me, I am a wife, mother, and breast cancer survivor. So after being diagnosed in 2014, I decided that I needed to do something different with my life. As I tell people, that was truly a blessing for me because I took a different career path. And so I formulated my business, LRJ Coaching and Business Solutions. I'm also a real estate investor. I focus in the state of North Carolina primarily. I am an elected official, so I serve on my local town board. I'm an author. I'm also a member of the John Maxwell team, being a certified coach, trainer, and speaker. And I facilitate courses with Cornell University, which are women in business, as well as diversity, equity, and inclusion, their certification program. So I stay a little busy, but I enjoy that mostly. So for those of you who are listening and watching, I do something a little bit different in my PowerPoint presentations, but I like to make it very interactive. So if you're listening and watching, you can get out your mobile devices, which could be your cell phone or your iPad, and you go to the website menti.com, menti.com, and use the code 3048-6153. And that's code 3048-6153. So I try to make it more interactive and less PowerPointy type so that you can be a lot more engaged. So what I like to do is to find out from those who are listening in the room, like to know, first of all, who's in the room and what's your role at your current organization. So if you're with us today, type in who's in the room, what your role is, and that gives me an idea of what's going on and what maybe some of your expectations are. So if you have that availability, to please type in what your role is in your organization. So I see we have a couple of people that are joining. So if you don't have the chance to do that, we will come back with that later, but I'd like to know what your role is in the organization. And then most importantly, I'd like to know, what would you like to get out of today's session? Yes, we're going to talk about inclusion, but what does that mean to you? Inclusion means something different to everyone. So if you have the opportunity, please go to your mobile device and put in code 3048-6153. What would you like to get out of today's session? I know what I'm going to cover, but I want to make sure that I provide you with whatever you're looking for out of today in regard to inclusion. Because diversity is a part of that. Equity is also part of it, but inclusion is the most important component, because if you're not inclusive in what you're doing, but you have a diverse workforce, and you're non-inclusive, then you're still missing the boat. So what we've got is understanding of what inclusion is versus diversity and its importance in creating a positive culture and climate. Excellent. So we'll talk about all of that today. So some of the learning objectives for today's session is understanding the importance of diversity and inclusion, and that's one of the responses that we received. What your role is in establishing an inclusive culture. We all play different roles. And I don't necessarily mean your role as being maybe a principal, a teacher, or anything of that nature. We have a responsibility in establishing what our corporate culture is, and I'm going to talk about some of those roles later on. And then most importantly, understanding ways to have a more inclusive culture. You may think that you have an idea, or you may already have some plans in place around what you want your organization to be like. But there are different ways to have a more inclusive environment. And so we need to have that knowledge and understanding of what that truly means, because you want to make sure that you're touching all aspects of the workforce when it comes to inclusion. So I'm going to talk about 6 ways that your organization can be more inclusive. The first is around educating your leaders. The second is creating affinity groups. The third is meeting people where they are. The fourth is listening to your employees, promoting within the organization, and then finally sharing that message with those that work in your organization. So you have your mobile devices and you can participate. What comes to mind when you hear the word inclusion? We all believe something differently, or we all hear something when we hear inclusion. But what comes to mind to you when you hear the word inclusion? So if you're able to participate, go to menti.com and use the code 3048-6153. A lot of times when I do this activity, I hear the different words such as a sense of belonging. I hear togetherness. Here we go, coming together, people, different, communication, absolutely. So we all learn or hear something different when we hear the word inclusion. It means something different to each of us. So thank you for those that are participating. So the first step is around educating leaders, and I'm going to talk about 4 components of that. It's the level of awareness, it's having empathy, it's the opportunity that we all have to be inclusive, and then most importantly, how do we engage others when we are looking at having an inclusive environment? So we're going to talk about awareness. Now, awareness is the first step, I believe, in making sure that change happens in the organization. If you're not aware that change is needed, if you're not aware that there is a lack of diversity or a lack of inclusion, then it's hard to make those changes if you don't have that level of awareness. Change doesn't necessarily always have to be about diversity, equity, inclusion. Change is about anything that changes in your organization. For schools, it could be change in the population of students. Are you prepared for that level of change? Are you prepared if there is a decrease in the teacher population because people have made changes? We all know in the recent statistics that 4.4 million people quit their jobs in September of this year. And I'm sure that some were educators. So if you're not aware that change is happening and you're not prepared for that change, that's where the trouble begins. So you have to have that level of awareness and be prepared for that. So studies show that, fostering psychological safety, and I now look at it as psychological bravery, means that coworkers feel safe, but most importantly, they feel brave to be vulnerable in the workplace. They feel brave enough to share what's happening in the organization. They feel safe and brave to share that maybe there's something that they're not comfortable with. And so they have to have that sense of belonging. They have to have that psychological safety or bravery in order to share what's happening. If they feel that they can't share what their feelings are, they can't bring their whole self to work, then we're not being inclusive in the workplace. So having a place where people feel that it's safe, they feel brave enough to share with others how they're feeling, or if someone has done something or said something to them that they don't feel is appropriate and they don't feel included, they don't feel that their voice is being heard, if they don't feel that they can share that, then your organization has room for opportunity around inclusion. Now, there are some benefits of diversity and inclusion in the workplace. It allows for that expanded creativity for people to share their ideas, because we cannot do this in a silo. We need other people to help us figure out what this plan or strategy is around being more inclusive. We make better decisions together when we have a diverse group of individuals who are sharing their thoughts and ideas. And that increases productivity in the workplace, and most importantly, increases the bottom line. And in the school environment, that means when your students are involved, when your teachers are involved, then that sense of engagement, that sense of belonging is there. And therefore, your population of students will increase. But most importantly, the scores for how students perform, that will increase when students feel that they have that sense of belonging in the atmosphere within the school. Teachers feel that their voices can be heard. Most importantly, when they feel that they have a sense of belonging and there's inclusion in the workplace. So if you have any questions along the way, please put it in the chat, and I'll make sure we get those covered. So this slide just basically says it's normal to have different perspectives within any organization or any workplace or any school. And it's the ability to communicate those perspectives is what makes your organization much stronger. Because again, we can't do things in silo. We need each other to improve and to be prosperous. So we'll switch now and talk about empathy. So this is the second level of awareness around inclusion. So in your school, in your organization, who needs empathy? Well, we all need some form of empathy. There are times when maybe someone is going through a situation, or maybe there's been something happened in that person's family. Oftentimes people want to, or may not feel that they can empathize with them, but we all need to have and know that there's the ability to share or provide empathy to others, because you want people to feel that I'm in a safe place, and if something's going on with me, I can share it with others and not be judged. And so you want to be able to make sure that people feel comfortable sharing what's going on with them, because people don't leave organizations or schools. They leave people. When they don't feel that they can bring their whole self to work or to the classroom or to the school, then they start to look for other opportunities where they can bring them whole selves to work. So you want to make sure that you're very inclusive in that aspect. And as individuals, when we know that we have done something wrong, so when we know better, it's our responsibility to do better. It's just like we teach our kids, treat others the way that you like to be treated. And that's what the foundation of diversity, equity, inclusion is all about. It's just to be nicer and kinder to each other, but most importantly, be respectful. And there's never a wrong time to do the right thing. Sometimes we may find ourselves thinking, well, I'll do that, after class, or I'll do that at the end of the day. No, you need to do it now. If you've said something or done something, or someone is not feeling, they're going through whatever it is, or maybe they feel that they can't share that information, take care of that at that particular moment. So don't wait to have that conversation with whomever you need to, or if it's having that conversation with that student, don't wait, because sometimes when you wait a little bit longer than taking action now, they may feel that, well, that person doesn't care about me, or they don't have an understanding of what I'm going through. So take action when it happens.
Can I just hang on that point, Linda? I mean,
absolutely.
Right there, right? Like when we talk about having a difficult conversation, you shovel the pile when it's small. But you're right. When I've been in situations where, because I didn't address it, I just condoned the behavior. Mm-hmm. Not on purpose. I'm like, but I'm condoning the behavior by not right then, like say, hey, I saw that, or I feel that, or hey, let's talk about, whatever the situation may be, you want to be able to address that because you're losing credibility by the second.
Exactly, by the second. And we all get so busy because our first thing is, well, we don't have time.
Yeah.
But if you take just a few moments to address it or correct it, then you'll have so much more time later on. It takes more time to correct a mistake than it is to address it immediately. Because by that time, people have forgotten about it, and you got to try to remember yourself
Yep.
Um,
What does our mentor John say? He says, if you're not preparing on the front end, you'll be repairing on the back end.
on the back end, absolutely.
Awesome. I didn't
It's
mean to interrupt you.
costly.
That's good. Absolutely.
Well, thank you for sharing that. And then as we talk about opportunities, we all have opportunities to be more inclusive in the workplace. But statistics show that, the cost of not being inclusive is tremendous. So there's a $1 trillion cost to companies in the United States, and that's the perception gap around diversity and inclusion. It's now costing, for 2020, a center did a study, and it was $500 billion is what companies have spent on employee disengagement. And most of the time people are, well, not most of the time, all of the time, we're disengaged when we don't feel that we belong, or we don't feel that we're included in something. And so it's costing America last year $500 billion for employee disengagement, when all it really takes is for us to just stop and have that conversation with that person, with that student, with that teacher, with that assistant principal, or that guidance counselor. It only takes just a few moments to have that conversation. But the bigger cost is not implementing a diversity, equity, inclusion program. It's not connecting with others. It's not letting people know how you feel. And that's really what all people want in the world. They just want to know that someone cares about them. But we are oftentimes so busy in that rat race trying to get things done. And unfortunately, there are times when we forget about the people, we forget about the students, and they just want to know that someone cares about them. So here, this slide just shows you that perception gap is $1 trillion. It was what it was in 2020. And that's a lot of money. Think about what a school could do with $1 trillion. Think about what a community could do with 500 billion. That's a lot of money for disengaged employees. And that means all employees in the US, 500 billion. So that's a lot of books.
It's more than Monopoly money, right? I mean, that's what spills
more
out
than
when you're
Monopoly
knocking
money.
over. Yeah, but so here's in the school that I'm currently at, Linda, like, I talked about, we've got a crisis that we're working through, and we've got challenges, and we got, people quitting, and we just started to add up the bills. And I'm like, what do you think?
Yeah.
It's going to be a $500,000 loss, I think, to this organization in a very short time, based upon a decision or two that just should have been addressed with just some early communication. And
absolutely.
it's significant. It's loss of credibility. It's loss of funding. I mean, there's so many pieces.
It's a ripple effect.
It really is. Yep. Yep.
And then you have to, when you hire new people, you have to retrain them. So there's more cost.
Yeah.
So it's a ripple effect. And I sometimes people don't think about all those different dynamics for just one teacher leaving. Or your student population declines and you lose funding. I mean, the impact is enormous.
Yeah, the cost of turnover. I mean, sometimes it's 4 to 8 times the salary of that person. Depending, and the higher they are in responsibility, the more the cost is, obviously. And so yeah.
Absolutely. And so then we talk about engagement, and this is my whole philosophy. I'll get off my soapbox, but what I believe is that we have to do better so that people can bring their whole self to the workplace. So the teachers can bring their whole self to the classroom. Students can bring their whole self into the classroom. We oftentimes don't bring our whole self or a discretionary self into whatever environment we're in because of the fear of being judged, whether it's by the way that they dress, or maybe students don't have the right sneakers. You know how kids are, time to go to school. Some of them, if they're not in a private school, they wear their own clothing, but bringing their whole self to the classroom or to the school. And if they're not able to do that, then that's where we know we have a problem. If you cannot bring your whole discretionary self into the fold, then there's something going on. There's something deeper that needs to be addressed. Any questions on that? So again, studies show that a more diverse workplace leads to a more profitable organization. And profits could mean, you know, that your student population increases, you get more funding. That's what it really means. And when employees feel included, they're more engaged and they're more committed to their work. Then they give much more of their discretionary goodwill to the employer. And so your teachers, of course, will bring more of themselves because they can do the things that they need to do to be effective teachers. And so if you have your electronic device and you type in that code 30486153, it's just, the question is, what's the first step to making change? What is the first step that I talked about earlier about to make change? Yes, it's that awareness. Then we do need to make sure that we're empathetic and we bring about opportunities, but that first step to making change in any organization or any school, any population, any church, it's about, we have to be aware of who we are and how we behave. Because without that, it just makes it so much harder to make progress. So it does show you who has participated. So whoever the snowman is. And then the next question is, what's the cost of disengaged employees in the United States based upon the 2020 results? Yes, $500 billion. A lot of money, $500 billion. And so if we had a larger group of individuals, I wanted to do a breakout activity, but what we will do is just have our discussion. What I wanted to do is to have the opportunity for you to share. We've talked about awareness, opportunity, empathy, and engagement. So I'd really like to hear from those that are participating, which one fits where your organization is. So the purpose was to have a brainstorm activity to share ideas on where your organization or school currently is, or where you might fit. And what are some of those gaps that you can talk about to mitigate? What are some of the gaps that you have that we can mitigate the areas of not being aware? Or is there an opportunity? Is there a lack of empathy? Or is there a lack of engagement? So just like to hear, what are some of your thoughts? Where do you think your school is based upon those 4 categories?
I would definitely say my school definitely has a lack of awareness at this point. I think they know things, but they're not really fully aware of what actually is going on or what actually goes on. And I think that has stopped them from doing a lot of growing. And I'm trying to change that culture. For sure.
Okay, good. Thanks for sharing. And how do you feel, what are some things you think you can do to get them to, number one, be more aware, but most importantly, get that engagement much more involved?
Well, to be honest with you, I am a strong believer of having all stakeholders at the table. I think that's how you do it. If you have all stakeholders at the table, there is nothing that can be said. If you're invited to the table, I give you a seat to the table and you choose to decline my invitation, then I don't listen to anything else, period.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
With that, I also offer several opportunities for them to have a seat at the table as well. So you can't say the timing is wrong.
Right.
With that being said, I'm very transparent as well. You know, this is what, we are currently experiencing, right? This is where we need to fix this. This is where I see us going if we fix this. So that's, it's a struggle. I'm not going to lie to you, it's a struggle, but we're growing, we're getting there. And that's honestly, I can sleep at night knowing that I have done that. And I'm fine with that.
Well, good. Yeah, I mean, that's great. I mean, because if you've done all that you can do, then the next is up to those individuals to put that into place. Because you've got the foundation is there. They just got to take action on it.
Absolutely.
Yeah, great. Thank you for sharing.
I think, where I'm at, if we don't, I would love to, boy, I mean, we're just struggling with so much. I think the empathy and engagement are because we've got 2 kind of parties here, right? We've got to move forward, but there's definitely a lack of empathy going on. And that's something I have to improve on. in my role, to be able to keep us all together, I'm definitely probably struggling with,
That's a tough one. A lot of people do struggle with that one.
Yeah, because I wasn't here, and I've only been in this organization 21 days, and we have a significant amount of challenges occurring. And to find, again, going back to the time to engage and be empathetic and hear and listen, that's missing, that's lacking. But at some point, right, we do have to move forward. So I guess when does that happen? What is the right amount of time for emotion and feeling, I guess, is where I struggle. But being in a consultant role, and then moving into an employee leader role, they're so different, right? Because that's what a consultant's job is. So when I always have this muddy kind of path. It's a fine line because I'm trying to balance both sides.
Right. Yeah. It's tough, but as long as you can identify where you are in that role, and then you go to the next role, then you're good. Just make sure you're very clear when you're changing roles.
Dr. Miller, listen, do not feel bad. I am suffering, I'm going to say suffering, with the same thing as you, as far as that empathy. Because, I was raised and with the mentality, like, do your work and go home. Don't put all that extra stuff in there. Be professional. Do your work and go home. Forget about all this fluff mess and all these feelings and all this extra stuff. We're here for the children. If it's not about children, I don't want to hear it. But I'm having, I'm just being honest, honey. So I am at the point now where I am trying to work on that, that empathy piece, because, Mr. Miller, I know you understand. You've been where I am, and you understand what I'm dealing with here. And it's difficult. I mean, I had a close moment earlier this week where I was just like, you know what? Y'all have a good day. So, because I can get a job, okay? It's difficult. It's really difficult. And as a leader, you just have to remember your why. And that's kind of what gets me with that. So, yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
And you're not alone, okay?
Well, we all have different roles when it comes to change. I mean, you have the individuals who are classified as obstructors, where they just don't want change at all. You have individuals who are hesitators. They're the wait and see, sit on the sidelines. Let's see what's going to happen first. Then you have those in the influencers, and those are people who carry that message into your school to, bring those other people on board. Then, of course, you have champions of change. They support the vision. They support the plan, the change that you have in place. But if you're a principal, you're in that role of pioneer. You're going to create and cast that vision of change for your organization, and you want those other people to follow along. But everybody's going to be at a different stage when it comes to change, because change is hard and nobody really likes it. It's really hard. But again, it's having that level of awareness where they are, so that you can bring them aboard with you. Great discussion. Thanks for sharing. So next I want to share with you around another way to be more inclusive is creating affinity groups. So everyone knows what affinity employee resource groups are, right? So these are a group of people who share something in common. When I worked in corporate, we had affinity groups for a variety of different reasons, but we had African American, we had Caucasian females, we had all women in business. We had a Latino Hispanic group. We had a disability group. But it's creating these groups, affinity groups, so that people feel that they have a sense of belonging with individuals that are more like them. They have something in common. But it also helps to increase retention, because people, again, have that sense of belonging. They feel included. It's great for recruitment. And you can assign goals and objectives for these individual groups based upon what your diversity, equity, inclusion business strategy is. And the meetings can be formal or informal, but it's based on, what do you have put in place and how you want these groups to create that sense of belonging and inclusion within the schools. But I have found it to be very effective. People have a voice, they feel safe. They have that sense of bravery. They can go to their group and share what may be going on with them where they may not feel comfortable sharing it in another venue. Do y'all have anything similar to that in your school system?
Maybe I think maybe the most common thing I hear in schools about like a social committee, maybe, or just, somewhere like a morale committee, if that would maybe align up to it. In terms of HR, most charter schools don't necessarily have an HR division. They should, because, some have, 50 to 100 employees, and you really need that expertise on your campus. So yeah.
Okay, yeah. And again, the importance of having these affinity groups is employee engagement, sense of belonging. Someone cares about me. I don't know if any of you have ever done the strengths finders, but one of the questions in the corporate surveys is, do you have a best friend at work? And a lot of times people don't, but this gives them an opportunity to have someone that cares about them, someone that they can connect with. And then they have that feeling of belonging and inclusion in the workplace. And these are just some groups of individuals or people who share things in common, where you can have an affinity group based upon gender, race, nationality, family status, religion, veterans, disability, public safety, and then common language. So when I was in corporate, I joined the Latino Hispanic group because I wanted to learn more about their culture, because my sister-in-law is from Colombia, and so I was trying to learn to speak Spanish. And so joining that group gave me a breadth of information and a better understanding, because she lived in one state and I lived in another. And so when we saw each other, sometimes I had difficulty understanding some of her behaviors, but by joining that group, it gave me a whole new perspective of that culture. And so she and I could communicate so much better, and I learned to speak Spanish a little bit better than what I did before. But it gives you that opportunity just to appreciate and celebrate the differences of others in the workplace. And then here are some examples: women in business, men in business, Asian American, Hispanic, Latino, African American, and then they've added to the LGBTQ, now it's LGBTQIA for intersex and asexual. So these are just some examples of affinity groups that you could put in your workplace.
Hey, Linda, can you back up on that last point? Is that
Yes.
Is that something, that last bullet there, the LGBTQIA, is that something that you have an expertise to be able, so when you come into an organization and do some training or some support, can you help them build these like affinity groups within their school? Is that something?
Oh, absolutely, yes.
Yeah, awesome.
When I was in corporate, I helped to build two of the groups. So I helped to build the women in business and then the African American group. And so corporate leadership assigned responsibilities. So we had a leader in each group. They had roles, they had meetings, and they planned activities and events to bring everyone together. So it wasn't just about bringing the people in that group, but it was bringing everyone from the organization together to celebrate the differences. And that's how people really got to understand each other a little bit better. They understand the behaviors, they understand some of the dress or the attire. And now we're looking at different hairstyles, because now hairstyle has become a hot topic when it comes to diversity, equity, inclusion in that workspace. So it just provided that venue for people to really have those tough conversations about how people behave differently, act differently, look differently, dress differently, and celebrate differently. Because there's some, when you have individuals who are in the Mideastern, they may need a prayer room. And so we had conversations about that and how to really set aside time and allow them time to do that, because we didn't want to infringe on their religious beliefs.
Yeah,
so you get into all of that.
Yeah, that'd be a really great resource. I know a lot of our schools have asked for that, so that'd be awesome.
Okay, good. Any other questions? So the next one is around, I kind of touched on this a little bit, but it's called the PCI-HO model. So it's the pioneers, champions, influencers, hesitators, and obstructors. So I touched briefly, but here just to show you that there are different roles when it comes to change. And each role has a purpose. They're motivated by something. They identify as a particular category. There's self-talk and their different behaviors that they have. And then there's change-driven actions that they take based upon what role they're playing. So as a leader in a school, you're that pioneer, or you should be in that pioneer role, but it depends. You may come into work that day and you are maybe in that hesitator role. You're in that wait and see, you want to watch from a distance to see what's going on. But as the leader of the organization, you are that person. Your purpose is to create and cast a vision for change. When it comes to motivation, you bring out the best in your teachers, you bring out the best in your students. But there may be times when you are like, not rocking the boat today. It just sort of depends upon how you are in that moment. So to give you an example, when I worked in corporate America, when there was change in the organization and what did you call it, right sizing, downsizing, whatever, there was change and people were going to be exited from the company because they were looking at cost. And so I was one of those individuals at the bottom. I was an obstructor, even though I was the leader. But that one particular day, I came in and I'm like, no, this is not happening because this is what's going to happen to my staff. This is how you are making them feel. But I had to, do a better job of myself of understanding why the change was happening so that I could show myself as a leader that I'm a champion of change. But that particular time period, through all the beginning stages of change, I was an obstructor because I was just not happy with change. And I was not going to let that happen until I had a better understanding of what the impact was going to be to my team and the organization overall. Once I had a better understanding and that fear of change kind of went away, and I started to ask myself some of those self-talk questions around, that's the common thing, we're doing this again. Corporate has a habit of doing it, and a lot of times they do it near the holiday time because they want to get the budget in. So I had to go through that whole phase of figuring out, where I was in the organization, where the company was going, what was going to happen to my team. So once I understood the change, why it was happening, then I became the influencer because I went up a notch. I was ready to cast the message because I'm feeling better about myself. I'm feeling better about why there's change in the organization, why the company wants to move people from, at that time it was from Zebulon, North Carolina, and move them to Aiken, South Carolina. I had to understand that why. And once I did, then I became that champion of change. I was more supportive. I was more in that behavior of what can I do to help? How can I add value to this organization? How can I add value to this process so that my team and others behind me can come along together and we can see the benefit of why change is happening in the organization. So does that kind of give you an idea of when we're talking about change of the different roles that you play? Doesn't mean that you have to stay in a particular role. I mean, you could be in all 5 roles in 8 hours. It just sort of depends upon what's happening at that moment.
Yeah, I really love this model and really helping people understand, because I think a lot of people would just say, well, what can I do, right? I'm just right? Or I'm just, right? And it's like, well, I mean, these are the different roles that you can play, but I don't have an understanding. I think everybody wants to know their role to the goal. And, bringing a process like this, a framework like this, I would say maybe is how you would call it, into an organization. So, hey, right now I need you to be the champion.
Yeah.
We need some champions right now. Who is that? Yeah.
Right, exactly. I mean, if you've got that many teachers and changing students, you need a lot of champions, but you also need a lot of influencers to help you with that, being enthusiastic about the change. Even though it may be tough when you're down a couple of teachers, they still have to be enthusiastic because you want them to bring their whole selves to work. And, how do they get everybody else to join in on, finding new teachers or doing that recruitment? But again, you're not going to be in one stage all the time, but you fluctuate. And it just depends upon what's happening. And it's not bad to be an obstructor. It's not bad to be a hesitator, because we, again, have to be aware of where we are when it comes to change. Because if you're not aware that you're an obstructor, oh my goodness, you can wreak havoc in an organization. You can tear up some stuff. But as long as people know where you are and you identify with that and you work towards becoming a hesitator, becoming an influencer, and ultimately being a champion of change, then things will work out fine. Any other questions? Hopefully that was helpful.
Yeah, totally helpful. No, I think that's just a great way to look at it.
Great, awesome.
And I think when you do this training, like because I've seen this, like you take those cards, right? Or you take those acronyms and you help, people understand this is almost like a leave behind in the organization where they can have a better understanding of this. Yeah. Excellent.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. I just did a training, a deeper dive in this, actually Tuesday for Granville County elected officials. And yeah, we spent a lot of time in this section. And if there were more people here, we'd have a breakout. We really talk about, what role do you see yourself in today? Are you a pioneer? Are you in that champion or influencer? Or are you a hesitator? Or are you an obstructor? As of today, not tomorrow, not how you felt yesterday, but as of today, because the way that you see yourself today impacts how the organization operates today. Because our mindset is different each time we wake up, unless you're a happy-go-lucky and you're always ready to bounce, ready to go. But are you bringing your whole self to work, even though you are that champion of change? You're just sort of going through the motions. But this is getting really, really deep. So where do you see yourself in your organization today out of those 5 roles? Any volunteers?
I don't know, maybe all 5. I guess I'm the pioneer. Yeah, that's a good one. I don't know. I've never thought about that part.
Okay.
But you're right. At certain times, I am all these pieces. I'm probably more the influencer than I am anything. It's hard for me to be the pioneer at times, right now, because of the lack of empathy maybe that I show or have. Could be, part of that.
Yeah, and it doesn't mean you have to be that pioneer today. I mean, that could be 3 weeks from now. Maybe you get to that pioneer state, but just having that awareness of where you are today. Great. Thanks for sharing. Dr. Ray, were you going to say something?
I'm definitely I'm 2 things at one time. I am the influencer and the pioneer.
Okay.
As far as pioneer is concerned, we're doing things that they've never done before. And, I'm trying to let them know, what's going on. It's 21st century. Let's go ahead on, And, they're getting on board. They're getting on board. I don't think they've ever had someone like me. And they're doing a good job with it. But yeah, we're definitely doing different things.
Well, that's good. And you're going to run into some hesitators along the way.
Right. We have a lot. Have a lot.
Yeah. And as long as they are okay with saying, hey, this is where I'm at today. Can you help me get to that next phase? Because I'm not just mentally there. If we recognize that, they will move so much faster to that next stage, because you identified and you've recognized how they are, how they're feeling about this change.
Right.
And therefore that helps them make progress so much faster. It's when we don't acknowledge and recognize and honor the people of where they are that they stay in that hesitator role, because they just want to be obstructed. I mean, think about your kids. If you tell them not to do something, oh my goodness, that's when they really want to do what you don't want them to do.
I think right now I'm facing the thing, that old saying that gets everybody in trouble. This is the way we've always done it.
Oh, this way
we've always done it this way. We're always done. I'm like, baby, well, it hasn't worked for you in the past. Let's go. Like what are we doing now?
Right.
So that's kind of where I'm trying to get that out. I have this thing where I go, I don't want to hear it. I don't want to hear that. Find a different way to say that.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Well, it's a new normal for them. And it's a new normal. And again, change is hard, and you have to take baby steps to get people to come along with you. But that's the whole issue, is that change is hard. They have a fear of what's going to happen if they do something different, because they're in their mind, the whole philosophy was, if it ain't broke, don't try to fix it.
Right, right. But see, and it's just that, I keep hearing like from everyone, we just need to get back to the way we were. Well, we'll never be back to the way we were. I
No.
mean, this pandemic, just life in general, we're different. We have different resources. We have different, the
Yes.
entire environment changed. That's never going to happen. And I think trying to get them to understand that, that's where I struggle. But I work with I will tell you, I work with amazing group of people. Like it's amazing. I mean, down to the board who's very supportive. So, we're working towards that. But I feel like, whereas in my old environment, I wouldn't have to try as hard to get the things
Right.
that I'm trying to get. Now I have to like make a presentation and then make a presentation for that presentation and
Right.
show them this is how it's going to work.
Right.
This is what we need to do. But
Right.
they've been great. Let me try a bunch of stuff. So I'm
Yeah.
excited about that.
Yeah. Well, you've got to build that trust.
Absolutely.
And trust takes a long time.
Absolutely. And I'm the type of person, I'm a goal-oriented person, and I'm always like one step after the other, and
Right.
just like Dr. Miller, like I've only been here a couple months as well. So, I have to just be patient, and I gotta understand that they have to get used to me. So
Yeah. Yeah, it's like riding a bike. If you've never ridden a bike before, you got to pedal a little bit, and you may fall off a couple of times, but you just got to keep practicing. And sometimes people just like, I can't ride it, I'm just getting off.
Yes. Yes.
I can totally understand. So thank you so much for sharing that.
Welcome.
The fourth way of being more inclusive is to listen to employees. Now, we all know that we can communicate and tell people what we want, or share what we want, or give them advice. But the words that we use, they only hear 7%. And 38% is how we say it. But the body language is 55%. And so body language is so critical when it comes to sharing a message of change, because that's what people pay attention to. How, if you're folding your arms, or moving your eyes, or some people roll their eyes. I mean, that's a part of body language. They pay attention to everything, where your hands are, how you're standing. And if you're a female, sometimes they look to see, are you wearing a dress or are you wearing slacks if you're in the workplace? They look at all of that and they don't hear what you are saying. I tell people oftentimes, it's like, if you have a spouse and you tell them to do something, I'm like, what'd you say? They didn't hear that because they are looking at something else that has nothing to do with what you said. So I call it selective hearing. So they pay attention to the eye contact and your body language, and that message will go so much further. Leaning in when you want to connect with that person. And if you're leaning backwards, they're like, you're in my space, they don't really want to hear it. So it's just important to pay attention to how we present ourselves physically to others, and how we get them to really pay attention and listen. And so, of course, there are two types of listening skills. You can be very attentive and you can be reflective. And holding eye contact with individuals goes such a long way. When you're in their space, not really face-to-face because of COVID restrictions, but you're giving them eye contact and you're leaning in and you're nodding and you're mirroring what they have to say. They will just love you to death because they're like, oh my gosh, she's giving me all, or he's giving me all of their attention. And people will gravitate to individuals who are like that because they want to be heard. And then you have the reflective listening, where you're repeating or paraphrasing what the speaker or person has said and showing that you truly understand what they're trying to tell you. And, it just takes a few moments to do that, to connect with people. And you'll see how far it will really go when people will come along with you, just because you're taking the time to hear what they have to say. Because people just want to be heard. And if they feel that they're not being heard, then they retreat. And what I call that is they just sort of go into a zone and they just are not listening. They're just tuned out because they are not being heard. So communication is really important when it comes to change in an organization. And the famous quote by Stephen Covey is, seek first to understand, then to be understood. And I think if we all took the time to do that, communication would be so effective and it would go so much further. The next one just shows that studies show that a way managers or leaders communicate and engages with their employees has a direct impact on business success. Because if employees or teachers or assistants feel that they're not being heard, then they don't feel that there's a sense of belonging. They're like, well, they never listen to anything that I say. Or if they're in a meeting and you may have people that don't raise their hand or don't voice their concern, because in the back of their minds they're thinking, well, I said something last time and no one paid any attention to what I had to say, or I felt dismissed. And so if that's happening, they will be less likely to want to share information. Those are going to be your disruptors when it comes to change, because they're like, well, nobody listens to me anyway, so why should I say anything? So why should I change? They're going to do what they want anyway. And that's kind of how sometimes people will feel. And then, of course, Tony Robbins, his favorite quote is, to effectively communicate, we must realize that we are all different in the way we perceive the world, and use this understanding as a guide to our communication with others, because we all see the world differently. It's just like earlier I asked, when you hear the word inclusion, what comes to mind? We all have a different perspective when we hear different words. And that's okay. It's just that that's how we all perceive it. And we just need to be aware of it and acknowledge it and accept it. So this is a leaderboard. If we were still playing the games on that, we'll move right along. The next one is promoting within the organization. So within the school system, I'm assuming that you all do promote within the organization. And when you do that, it most importantly increases employee retention, of course, low turnover rate, maintains continuity, because you don't have to retrain another teacher or get them up to speed with how that particular classroom is run or how the school is run overall. Retaining talent and retaining that knowledge, because there's a cost when you have to bring in new teachers and retrain them to how your organization operates. So that's one of the benefits in doing that. And then lastly, promoting what your inclusion standards, your inclusion goals, and then sharing that. Because just creating standards or creating this is how your mission and vision is around diversity, equity, inclusion, creating it and then not incorporating it or sharing it with the faculty does not go a long way if you keep it to yourself. So you have to and need to communicate what those inclusion standards are. Ensure that everyone understands what that means. Again, people may not understand what you have written, but if you could talk about it, they will have more clarity around what that really meant. And then recognizing that communication is not a one-way street. It's bringing everyone to the table, as Dr. Ray said earlier. Everyone has a seat at the table. Give everyone the opportunity to share and hear how they feel you can be more inclusive. Holding yourself and your team members accountable. Once you create these standards and goals and you share it, you need to be accountable, because if you can't measure it, then you can't manage it. So you need to hold yourself and everyone else accountable. And your primary role is to make inclusion a part of the everyday culture. This is not a checkbox mentality. You just don't do it today and then we'll worry about it next November. That's not the way it is. This needs to be something that's embedded into the organization. It's just like getting up in the morning, you get up, wash your face, brush your teeth. Inclusion should be just like that when you're in the workplace. So it's not something you have to think about. You automatically will do the right thing. So when you know better, you do better. And then just pay attention to how others understand your message. Body language is one thing that I talked about, people look at. How you deliver that message will go a really long way. And then watch how your standards are followed. So once your standards have been communicated, you notice people are paying attention and they're implementing some of these changes, then that's when you know that change is happening. Action indicates when change is happening. And then establish some best practices. Make sure people are attending leadership training around diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. Have an inclusion charter. Some organizations create that because unfortunately, it's just like the laws around diversity, equity, inclusion. When we don't do right, the government creates laws. So we kind of have to do the same thing when it comes to inclusion in the workplace. If you create a charter, then everyone will be on board because they're like, we need to make sure we do that. So sometimes you may find yourself having to do that because we as individuals, we're human. We sometimes need a little more instruction because sometimes we don't always want to do the right thing. So establishing an inclusion charter may be useful for your organization. And then creating metrics around the diversity inclusion programs that you have in place, making sure people are excited about it, they attended, they're engaged in it. So have some metrics around that. And don't just do it once a year. Celebrate the differences, maybe every quarter, but whatever it is, be consistent in what your practices are. Because if you just do one thing this year, and then next year you forget about it, and then the following year you're going to try to do 3 things before you catch up, no one's going to want to be engaged because they're like, well, they're just doing it because they didn't do it last year. And that's not what you want to have happen. We talked about establishing affinity groups or employee resource groups so people have a sense of belonging, and then establish a system to measure the effectiveness of the changes that you've made. And that's really basically around doing employee engagement surveys. And people will let you know how they're really feeling. And I don't mean doing a survey that means electronically, but having those tough conversations, those tough discussions around, we've put these things in place. Now, are we walking the talk? Are we doing what we said we were going to do? And are you reaping the benefits from that? Do you feel that there's change? Are you much more engaged? But just having those tough conversations face to face, that's when you'll really know that change has happened. So, one word to describe what I've talked with you today. Just one word would be helpful, and you don't have to do the Menti Sisters, just 3 of us. But what's one word that would describe what I talked about today? How you understood, how you feel about it? One word.
Awareness. I was gonna say, I put the word awareness. I think, as you said, awareness is the key to learning, right? But it does take action, but it takes the right action too, And I remember when the George Floyd incident occurred, and we had oh man, his name is escaping me now, from the Greensboro 4 came and talked to us, and as an inner circle just like this. And I was like, I didn't know it was part of my role to be this, right? To do this. And so I've worked harder. I'm nowhere near where I need to be. But the more that you keep learning and be open and really be listening to understand about what you could do differently, I mean, those are some of the keys. So I appreciate you, Dr. Linda Jordon, and I can't wait to hear more from you. We got engagement, I see it.
Yay!
Yeah.
I finally got it.
Yeah. I love this. I love this tool that you're using, menti.com. I was just actually searching for something the other day. I'll have to tell our team about it.
Yeah, it's like I said, I did a training on Tuesday. I had 40 people, and from all different age groups, all different municipalities and different leaders, and they absolutely loved it because they were in competition trying to make sure, they were up there first, and I was giving prizes and all that kind of stuff. So they just absolutely love it. But it creates engagement because we all now are in a world of technology. And we often sometimes, and as being in the school system, you may need to check your phone, or you may need to check an email for whatever reason, or, if you've got kids, you might have to. So if you're going to be doing that anyway, let's make it interactive, bring it into the fold, check your email, and then respond. So I got you both ways.
And I'm glad that you put that piece, but I put engagement because just remembering to make everyone feel engaged. So have a little something for everyone.
Absolutely, yeah. And everyone's not going to be tech savvy, and that's okay. That's why we have chat if we're doing this virtually. But face to face, of course, then I try to do it both ways because some people, they're just not there, and that's okay. That's really okay.
You do an old school parking lot with sticky notes.
Yeah,
I like those
days. or microfilm because
Yeah. Yeah, we used to do the big gigantic sticky notes, and we called it the parking lot. Drew a
Yep,
cute
the parking lot.
Yeah, drew a cute little picture of the bus on there and gave the teacher sticky notes.
Yep,
put your concerns on the sticky notes in the parking lot.
right, exactly. Put it in the parking lot. I remember. So the main thing is that if you don't remember anything that I said today, hopefully you remember awareness, but take action. Do something to be more inclusive in the workplace within your school system. And once you start taking action, people will start to take notice. And when they take notice, then they will take action themselves. So hopefully this was helpful and you've learned something today, which I believe you have. I appreciate your time and look forward to another opportunity.
I love it, Linda. So how do we take action for you? Where do we find you? How do we reach out to you?
So this is how you reach me here. So my email is linda@lrj-consulting.com, or you can contact me via my cell, which is 919-622-4685, or go to my website, which is lindajordan.com.
Yeah, do not go to lindajordan.net because that's where I just was. I'm like, that's not her. So yeah, lindajordan.com.
And it's Jordon, Jordon, no relation to Michael Jordan.
Yes, I see it. All right. Yeah, we'll make sure we share this back out along with his contact info. And this is, something so you could do this, training for the leadership team, or you could come into the entire organization and do this and actually take them through the exercises, right? So there's lots of things that you could do.
Yeah, so I have a full day, a 4-hour workshop. It depends upon how interactive people are. It could go 5 hours, but it's typically 4 hours. And when we go from the beginning stages of what is diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging, all the way through to the end of if you hear something, say something, and how you report those incidents so that you're not dealing with the EEOC or someone suing you because you said or did something that was inappropriate.
Fantastic. All right. Well, thanks again, Dr. Linda Jordon. Appreciate you. Great information. And visit Linda at lindajordan.com. Or I'm going to put the links, there. So everybody, so just go to the email that you found this at and reach out to Linda. She can do all sorts of different levels of diversity and inclusive training for you and your organization. So thanks, Linda. Have a great day. Thanks everybody who joined us
for
live.
participating. This was very engaging, and I appreciate your attention. So it's a pleasure to have had the opportunity.
Yeah, you got it. All right, you make it easy, Linda. So okay.
Oh,
all right.
thank
Thanks,
you.
everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.